I was standing in my kitchen, pouring my second cup of coffee, when I saw the email notification light up my phone. And something told me it was going to ruin my perfectly good Saturday morning in Vermont. The subject line read, "Urgent, violation notice, immediate action required," and came from Deborah Patterson, the president of the Ridgeline Estates Homeowners Association. My gut was right. I lived on a 40-acre property in Stowe, Vermont, right at the edge of the Ridgeline Estates development. The property had been in my family for 3 generations, passed down from my grandfather who bought it back in 1952. When developers came through in the late 90s and built the fancy subdivision next door, they convinced me to join their HOA for what they called mutual benefit and property value protection. Looking back, that was the dumbest decision I ever made. My name is Brandon Mitchell, and I am a wilderness guide and outdoor equipment retailer. My property sits right at the base of Mount Mansfield, with direct access to some of the best snowmobile trails in northern Vermont. For the past 15 years, I had been running a small side business guiding snowmobile tours through the backcountry. The trails that crossed my land connected to the state park system, making my property a crucial access point for hundreds of riders every winter season. I opened the email and felt my blood pressure spike. Deborah had sent a formal violation notice informing me that the HOA board had voted unanimously to ban all motorized recreational vehicles, including snowmobiles, ATVs, and dirt bikes, from operating on any trails within or adjacent to HOA properties. According to her email, this included the trails that crossed my land because they were within visible and audible range of HOA residents. She gave me 72 hours to cease all snowmobile operations or face daily fines of $500. I read the email 3 times, each time getting angrier. The trail on my property was a good half-mile from the nearest HOA house. The noise was minimal, and in 15 years, I had never received a single complaint. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer, Tom Henderson, who had helped me with property disputes before. "Tom, it's Brandon. I need your help with something insane." Tom listened as I explained the situation. He was quiet for a moment before responding. "Brandon, do you still have that state licensing agreement? The one with the Vermont State Parks Department?" I paused. "The what?" "About 8 years ago, you called me about some paperwork the state sent you. They wanted to officially license a right-of-way corridor through your property to connect 2 sections of the state trail system. You signed it, and they paid you an annual fee. Do you remember that?" The memory came flooding back. In 2018, the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation had approached me about formalizing the trail access through my land. They had been using an informal route, but wanted to make it official for liability and maintenance purposes. I had signed a 20-year licensing agreement granting them a perpetual easement through my property in exchange for $2,000 annually, and the state assuming all liability for trail maintenance and accidents. Oh my God, I completely forgot about that. They deposit the money directly into my account every January. I just thought it was rent for trail access. Tom laughed. "It is rent, but more importantly, it is a legally binding agreement with the state of Vermont. That means the HOA has zero authority to shut down that trail. It is state-licensed public access land now. They can complain all they want, but they would have to sue the state government to close it." I felt relief wash over me. "So I can ignore this email?" "Not exactly. You should respond and inform them of the state licensing agreement. Send them a copy of the contract. I would also recommend being polite but firm. These HOA disputes can get ugly fast, and you want documentation showing you tried to resolve this reasonably." I thanked Tom and hung up. I spent the next hour digging through my filing cabinet until I found the original agreement with the state. It was a thick document, full of legal language, but the key points were clear. The state of Vermont had exclusive rights to maintain and operate the trail corridor through my property for recreational purposes until 2038. The agreement specifically stated that no local ordinances, homeowner associations, or municipal regulations could supersede the state's authority over the designated corridor. I scanned the document and drafted a polite but direct email to Deborah Patterson. I explained the situation, attached the licensing agreement, and noted that while I appreciated the HOA's concerns about noise and property values, the trail was under state jurisdiction, and I had no legal authority to close it even if I wanted to. I hit send and went about my day, figuring that would be the end of it. I was wrong. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. I had 7 missed calls from Deborah Patterson and 3 voicemails, each one more agitated than the last. In the final message, her voice was shaking with rage. "Mr. Mitchell, this is unacceptable. I do not care what agreement you think you have with the state. The HOA covenants clearly state that all residents must comply with reasonable community standards. Noise pollution and dangerous recreational vehicles are not acceptable. If you do not cease operations immediately, we will be forced to take legal action and fine you for every single day of violation. This is your final warning." I called Tom again. "She is threatening to fine me." "Can she actually do that?" Tom sighed. "She can try, but she will lose. The state licensing agreement supersedes HOA authority. However, I recommend you attend the next HOA board meeting and explain this in person. Sometimes these situations escalate because people feel ignored or disrespected. If you show up, present your case calmly, and offer to work with them on reasonable accommodations, it might diffuse the situation." The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at the community clubhouse. I showed up 15 minutes early with printed copies of the state licensing agreement and a short presentation I had put together showing the trail map, usage statistics, and the economic benefits snowmobile tourism brought to the Stowe area. The clubhouse was a fancy building with cathedral ceilings and leather furniture that screamed, "We have money and want you to know it." About 30 HOA residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a long table where the board members sat. Deborah Patterson was front and center, a woman in her early 50s with blonde hair cut into an aggressive bob and designer glasses that probably cost more than my truck payment. She spotted me immediately, and her expression hardened. "Mr. Mitchell, how nice of you to join us." I nodded politely and took a seat in the back row. The meeting started with routine business, approving minutes from the last meeting, discussing landscaping contracts, and debating the color palette for the community entrance sign. Finally, Deborah moved to new business and launched into a passionate speech about the snowmobile problem. As many of you know, we have a serious issue with noise pollution and safety concerns related to snowmobile traffic near our community. Despite our clear rules against motorized recreational vehicles, one property owner has refused to comply with our reasonable requests. This is exactly the kind of situation the HOA exists to prevent. If we allow one person to ignore our rules, it opens the door for everyone to do whatever they want, and our property values will plummet. She went on for another 5 minutes, painting me as some kind of reckless outlaw who was single-handedly destroying the neighborhood. When she finally finished, I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell, I assume you have something to say." Her tone was dripping with condescension. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. "I do, actually. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the board and the community. I want to start by saying I understand your concerns about noise and safety. I have been operating snowmobile tours on my property for 15 years, and I take both of those issues very seriously." I handed out copies of the state licensing agreement to each board member. "What I want to make clear is that the trail crossing my property is not just a casual path I created. It is a state-licensed public access corridor managed by the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks and Recreation. I signed a 20-year agreement with the state in 2018 giving them exclusive authority over that trail. That means the HOA, the town of Stowe, or even I as the property owner cannot legally close or restrict access to that trail without the state's approval." Deborah's face was turning red. "That is ridiculous. You cannot just sign away your responsibilities to the HOA." I kept my voice calm. "I am not signing away anything. The agreement was signed before I even knew the HOA was planning these new restrictions. The state has sovereign authority over designated public recreation areas." I brought copies of the relevant Vermont statutes if you would like to review them. Another board member, a man named Gerald who owned a car dealership in Burlington, spoke up. "So you are saying we have no recourse at all? We just have to accept the noise and danger?" "I am saying the trail is staying open because it is state property now, but I am absolutely willing to work with you on mitigation measures. The trail is half a mile from the nearest house in your development. If noise is genuinely an issue, I can install sound barriers or adjust the tour schedule to avoid early mornings and late evenings. I can also provide the board with monthly usage reports and safety data. In 15 years of operation, there has never been a single accident or injury on my property." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "I live on Ridgeline Drive, which is the closest street to your property. Honestly, I barely notice the snowmobiles. We hear more noise from the highway than from your tours." Deborah shot her a glare that could melt steel. "That is not the point, Susan. The point is we have rules and everyone needs to follow them." I took a breath. "With all due respect, Mrs. Patterson, your rules cannot override state law. I am happy to be a good neighbor and work with the community, but I cannot and will not close a state-licensed public trail. If you want to pursue this further, you will need to take it up with the Vermont State Parks Department, not with me." The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Half the room seemed to support my position, while the other half backed Deborah. After 20 minutes of shouting, the board voted to table the discussion and seek legal counsel. I left the clubhouse feeling cautiously optimistic. I had presented my case, offered reasonable compromises, and made it clear I was not trying to antagonize anyone. That optimism lasted exactly 4 days. The following Monday, I found a certified letter in my mailbox from the HOA's law firm. They were demanding I cease all snowmobile operations immediately and pay $15,000 in accumulated fines for ongoing violations of community standards. The letter claimed the state licensing agreement was invalid because I had not disclosed it to the HOA when I signed the covenant agreement, and therefore I was in breach of contract. I called Tom immediately. "They are claiming I breached the HOA contract by not telling them about the state agreement." Tom laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "That is absolutely absurd. The state agreement came years after you joined the HOA, and regardless, the HOA has no legal standing to interfere with state property rights. They are grasping at straws. I will draft a response and explain that if they continue this harassment, we will file a countersuit for legal fees and damages." You think it will come to that? Honestly, Brandon, I hope not. But I have dealt with HOA boards before, and sometimes they become obsessed with winning at any cost. This Deborah woman sounds like she has made this personal. Tom was right. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated dramatically. The HOA sent me 3 more violation notices, each with increasingly absurd claims. They said my snowmobile tours were causing erosion damage to community property, even though the trail was entirely on my land and the state corridor. They claimed the noise was causing emotional distress to residents. They even suggested my business was attracting undesirable elements to the neighborhood, which I found particularly offensive since my clients were mostly families and outdoor enthusiasts. The daily fines kept accumulating on paper. According to the HOA's calculations, I now owed them over $40,000. Tom assured me the fines were meaningless and would never hold up in court, but the stress was taking its toll. Then things got really weird. One morning in late January, I was preparing for a guided tour with a family from Massachusetts when I found orange traffic cones blocking the entrance to my driveway. A large sign reading "Road closed by order of Ridgeline Estates HOA" was zip-tied to my mailbox. I moved the cones and tore down the sign, but it rattled me. The HOA was now physically interfering with my property access. I called the Stowe Police Department and filed a report. The officer who responded, a young guy named Officer Mike Reynolds, was sympathetic, but said there was not much he could do unless I could prove who placed the cones. These HOA disputes are civil matters, Mr. Mitchell. Unless someone is threatening you or committing vandalism, we generally stay out of it. What if they keep blocking my driveway? Then you can document it and use it as evidence in your civil case. You might also want to install security cameras. I took his advice and installed 4 high-definition cameras around my property that afternoon. It was a good thing I did. 2 days later, the cameras caught Deborah Patterson herself, along with another board member named Linda, sneaking onto my property at 6 in the morning and placing a chain across the trail entrance. The footage was crystal clear, showing them using a padlock to secure the chain to 2 trees on either side of the path. I was livid. I called Tom immediately and sent him the footage. "This is trespassing and property destruction," Tom said, "not to mention interference with state property. The trail is state-owned now, remember. They just vandalized government property. What should I do? Call the police and file a formal complaint. Then send a copy of the footage to the Vermont State Parks Department. They are going to be very interested in this." I followed his instructions. Officer Reynolds came back out and watched the footage. His expression was grim. "Okay, this is definitely criminal trespassing and vandalism. I will need to interview Mrs. Patterson and the other woman. Do you want to press charges?" "Absolutely." The next few hours were surreal. The police went to Deborah's house and questioned her. She apparently denied everything at first, but when they showed her the video footage, she changed her story. She claimed she was acting in the HOA's best interest and had the authority to secure the trail because it was a safety hazard. Officer Reynolds was not buying it. "Madam, you do not have the authority to block access to state property, regardless of your position with the HOA. You trespassed on Mr. Mitchell's land and damaged state property. I am issuing you both citations for criminal trespassing. You will need to appear in Lamoille County Superior Court next month." I also sent the footage to the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. They responded within hours. A stern email from a state attorney informed me that they were opening an investigation into the HOA's interference with public recreation access. and would be sending representatives to inspect the property and meet with the HOA board. The state representative, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Hendricks who worked as the regional trail coordinator, showed up 2 days later. She spent an hour walking the trail with me, taking photographs and GPS coordinates. She was appalled at what had happened. "Mr. Mitchell, I want you to know the state takes this very seriously. That trail is part of a critical corridor connecting 2 major recreation areas. Hundreds of people use it every season. The fact that a homeowners association tried to unilaterally close state property is not just inappropriate, it is potentially illegal under Vermont public access laws. What happens now? I am going to draft a formal letter to the HOA board explaining the legal situation in no uncertain terms. I will also be recommending that the Attorney General's office investigate whether the HOA violated any state statutes regarding interference with public lands. Depending on what we find, there could be civil penalties." Patricia kept her word. Within a week, the Ridgeline Estates HOA received a 10-page letter from the Vermont Attorney General's office explaining in excruciating legal detail why the HOA had no authority over the trail, why their actions constituted illegal interference with state property, and why continued harassment of me or attempts to block the trail could result in criminal charges against individual board members. I thought that would be the end of it. The state had spoken, the police had issued citations, and surely the HOA would back down. But Deborah Patterson was not done fighting. In early February, I received notice that the HOA was suing me in civil court for breach of contract and seeking an injunction to close the trail until the matter was resolved. Tom was incredulous when I forwarded him the filing. "They are actually suing you," after the state explicitly told them they have no legal standing. "This is insane." What do? We fight back, and we file a countersuit for harassment, legal fees, and damages. I am also going to contact the state Attorney General's office and suggest they intervene as an interested party. The state has a vested interest in keeping that trail open. The legal battle consumed my life for the next 6 weeks. Tom filed our response and countersuit. The Attorney General's office did indeed intervene, filing a motion to dismiss the HOA's lawsuit on the grounds that the state's sovereign authority over the trail made the HOA's claims moot. The judge scheduled a hearing for mid-March. During this time, the HOA continued its campaign of harassment. I received angry letters from residents I had never met, accusing me of being selfish and destroying the community. Someone spray painted "Close the Trail" on the state park sign at the entrance to my property. My business started getting negative online reviews from anonymous accounts claiming I was rude and dangerous. Even though I had never interacted with most of these people, the stress was overwhelming. I barely slept. My business was suffering because I was spending all my time dealing with lawyers and police reports instead of guiding tours and managing the shop. I started to wonder if it was worth it. Maybe I should just sell the property and move somewhere else, somewhere without an HOA breathing down my neck. But then something unexpected happened. The Stowe community rallied behind me. Local businesses that relied on snowmobile tourism started speaking out against the HOA. The Stowe Area Association, which promoted tourism in the region, issued a statement supporting my right to operate the trail and highlighting the economic importance of winter recreation. Other snowmobile tour operators organized a group ride through my property as a show of solidarity, bringing over 100 riders through the trail in a single day. Local news picked up the story. A reporter from the Burlington Free Press came out and interviewed me. The article framed the situation as a David versus Goliath story. A local business owner being bullied by an out-of-touch HOA that did not understand or care about the community's outdoor recreation heritage. The article went viral on social media, and suddenly, I was getting messages of support from people all over Vermont and beyond. The negative publicity seemed to rattle the HOA. Several residents started publicly questioning Deborah's leadership. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended with Tom's blessing, there was open revolt. Nearly half the residents showed up specifically to demand the board drop the lawsuit against me. One homeowner, a retired teacher named Margaret, stood up and gave an impassioned speech. I moved to Stowe because of its outdoor recreation culture. Snowmobiling is part of this community's identity. The idea that our HOA is trying to shut down a trail that has been operating peacefully for 15 years is embarrassing. We are making ourselves look like entitled bullies, and I want no part of it. Others echoed her sentiment. The tide was clearly turning against Deborah, but she refused to back down. This is about principle, she insisted. If we let one person ignore our rules, the entire HOA system falls apart. Gerald, the car dealership owner who served on the board, finally spoke up. Deborah, I have been doing some research. The state has made it very clear we have no legal standing here. Our lawyer has already billed us $40,000 and we are going to lose. I move that we drop the lawsuit and issue a formal apology to Mr. Mitchell. Deborah looked like she had been slapped. You cannot be serious. After everything we have invested in this case, I am completely serious. We are wasting HOA funds on a lawsuit we cannot win, and we are destroying our reputation in the process. It is time to cut our losses. The board voted. 4 members voted to drop the lawsuit. Only Deborah voted to continue. She was outvoted. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from the HOA's law firm informing me they were withdrawing the lawsuit. There was no apology, just a terse statement that the board had decided to pursue other remedies. Tom called it a total victory. They know they lost, Brandon. They are just trying to save face. The court hearing in mid-March was anticlimactic. The judge dismissed the HOA's case with prejudice, meaning they could never refile the same lawsuit. He also awarded me $35,000 in legal fees and damages, to be paid by the HOA. In his ruling, the judge was scathing. This court finds that the Ridgeline Estates Homeowners Association acted in bad faith and in clear defiance of established state law. The defendant, Mr. Mitchell, had every legal right to operate the trail on his property pursuant to his agreement with the state of Vermont. The HOA's attempts to interfere with state property rights and harass Mr. Mitchell through frivolous litigation are reprehensible. This case should never have been filed. I should have been thrilled, but I was mostly just exhausted. The legal battle had drained me financially and emotionally. Even with the court award, I was still out thousands of dollars in lost business and personal expenses, but the story was not over yet. In late March, Officer Reynolds called me with surprising news. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to give you a heads up. We have been investigating some of the incidents that occurred during your dispute with the HOA, and we have uncovered some pretty serious stuff. What kind of stuff? Well, remember those negative online reviews your business received? We traced several of them back to Deborah Patterson's computer. That is illegal defamation and business interference. We are also investigating the vandalism to the state park sign. A witness came forward saying they saw Mrs. Patterson's car near your property the night it happened. Are you going to arrest her? That is up to the prosecutor, but I would say it is likely. We have enough evidence to charge her with several misdemeanors, possibly a low-level felony for the defamation and business interference. The state attorney general's office is also looking at whether she violated any laws related to interfering with public recreation access. 2 weeks later, Deborah Patterson was arrested at her home and charged with criminal trespassing, vandalism of state property, criminal defamation, and interference with a business. The news spread through Stowe like wildfire. The Burlington Free Press ran another article with the headline, "HOA President Arrested After Snowmobile Trail Dispute." The HOA held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Deborah from the board. Several residents also initiated a recall petition to amend the HOA bylaws and limit the board's authority to interfere with individual property rights. The whole organization was in chaos. Deborah's criminal trial was scheduled for June. Tom encouraged me to attend, saying it would bring closure to the whole ordeal. I reluctantly agreed. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Video footage of Deborah trespassing and chaining the trail, digital forensics showing she had posted fake reviews from her computer, and witness testimony placing her at the scene of the vandalism. Deborah's lawyer tried to argue that she believed she was acting within her authority as HOA president, but the judge was not sympathetic. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, counselor. Mrs. Patterson was repeatedly informed by state officials and law enforcement that her actions were illegal. She chose to continue anyway. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail, suspended to probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay restitution to both me and the state for damages. He also issued a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of my property. In his sentencing remarks, the judge was pointed. "Mrs. Patterson, you allowed your personal vendetta against Mr. Mitchell to cloud your judgment and lead you down a path of criminal behavior. You abused your position of authority within the HOA and caused significant harm to both an innocent business owner and the state's public recreation infrastructure. I hope you take this opportunity to reflect on your actions and make better choices in the future." As I watched Deborah leave the courtroom, flanked by her lawyer and her embarrassed-looking husband, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was satisfied to see justice served, but mostly, I just felt sad. All of this conflict, all of this stress and expense and anger, over a trail that had been peacefully operating for 15 years. It was such a waste. The aftermath of the trial brought unexpected changes. The Ridgeline Estates HOA underwent a complete restructuring. The residents voted to amend the bylaws, significantly limiting the board's power to impose rules without community approval. They also established a grievance committee to mediate disputes before they escalated to legal action. Several residents reached out to me personally to apologize for the whole mess. Gerald, the car dealership owner, was elected as the new HOA president. One of his first acts was to send me a formal letter of apology on behalf of the entire organization. He also proposed a partnership where the HOA would help maintain a small parking area at the trailhead and put up informational signs promoting responsible snowmobile use. It was a gesture of goodwill, and I appreciated it. My business slowly recovered. The publicity from the legal battle actually brought in new customers who had heard about my stand against the HOA and wanted to support me. That summer, I was busier than ever, running ATV tours and hiking expeditions. The state even featured my property in a promotional video about Vermont's outdoor recreation opportunities. In August, I attended a community barbecue hosted by the HOA. It felt surreal to be socializing with the same people who had been sending me angry letters 6 months earlier, but the atmosphere was genuinely friendly. People apologized, shared their own frustrations with the old HOA regime, and thanked me for standing up to the overreach. Margaret, the retired teacher who had spoken up at the meeting, approached me with a plate of potato salad. "Brandon, I wanted to thank you for not giving up. A lot of people would have just closed the trail and moved on, but you fought for what was right. You reminded this community what Stowe is supposed to be about." I smiled. "I just did what I had to do. That trail is important to a lot of people, not just me." "Well, you made a difference. The new HOA board is actually focused on building community instead of enforcing petty rules. That is because of you." As autumn arrived and the leaves began to change, I found myself reflecting on the entire experience. It had been the most stressful year of my life, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of community support, and the dangers of giving too much power to any organization, even a homeowners association. I also learned to appreciate the protections that state and federal public land designations provide. Without that licensing agreement with the Vermont State Parks Department, I would have had no defense against the HOA's demands. The state's sovereign authority had been the shield that protected not just my business, but a vital piece of public recreation infrastructure. In October, I received a letter from Patricia Hendricks at the State Parks Department. She informed me that Vermont was reviewing HOA regulations statewide to prevent similar conflicts in the future. The Attorney General's office was drafting new guidelines clarifying that HOAs have no authority to interfere with state-licensed public access routes, and that any attempts to do so could result in criminal charges. My case was being used as the primary example of why these protections were necessary. Your willingness to stand up to the Ridgeline Estates HOA helped protect public access rights for everyone in Vermont, Patricia wrote. "Thank you for your courage and persistence." When winter returned and the snow began to fall, I prepared for another snowmobile season. The trail was busier than ever, with riders from all over New England coming to experience the routes through my property. The state had upgraded some of the trail markers and installed new safety signage, making the corridor safer and more accessible. On the first big snowfall of the season, I took my vintage 1985 Ski-Doo out for a solo ride, following the trail from my property deep into the state forest. The morning was crystal clear, the sun glinting off fresh powder, and the mountains rising majestically in every direction. This was why I lived in Vermont. This was why I had fought so hard to protect this trail. As I rode, I thought about Deborah Patterson. I had heard through the grapevine that she had moved away from Stowe, unable to handle the embarrassment of the trial and her conviction. Her husband had left her, and she had taken a job in another state. I did not take any pleasure in her downfall. If anything, I felt sorry for her. She had become so consumed with control and authority that she destroyed her own life. The experience changed how I approached my HOA membership. I started attending meetings regularly, volunteering for committees, and working with the new board to create reasonable policies that actually benefited the community. I realized that HOAs are not inherently bad. They just need good leadership and engaged members who are willing to speak up when things go wrong. Gerald and I became unlikely friends. He confessed that he had known Deborah was going too far, but had been too cowardly to stand up to her until the community pressure became overwhelming. "You taught me something important," he said over beers at a local pub. "Sometimes doing the right thing means accepting short-term conflict to prevent long-term harm." I should have stood up to Deborah from the beginning. The legal settlement from the HOA allowed me to invest in my business. I bought 3 new snowmobiles, upgraded my guide equipment, and renovated the small cabin on my property that I used as a base for tours. I also hired 2 part-time employees, both local kids who grew up snowmobiling and were thrilled to work in the industry. In December, almost exactly a year after receiving that first threatening email from Deborah, I was invited to speak at a state legislative hearing about HOA regulations. Lawmakers were considering new laws to limit HOA authority and protect property owners from the kind of overreach I had experienced. I testified about my experience, emphasizing that while HOAs serve an important function, they need clear legal boundaries and accountability. No homeowners association should have the power to override state law or harass residents who are acting within their legal rights, I told the committee. My case was extreme, but I have heard from dozens of other Vermonters who have faced similar issues. We need common-sense reforms that preserve the legitimate functions of HOAs while preventing abuse of power. The committee seemed receptive, and several legislators told me afterward that my testimony had been powerful and persuasive. The proposed legislation was expected to pass in the next session. As the holidays approached, I received a surprise package in the mail. It was from Linda, the other HOA board member who had been with Deborah when they chained the trail. Inside was a handwritten note and a generous gift certificate to my business. Dear Brandon, the note read, I know no apology can undo the harm I caused, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. I got caught up in Deborah's crusade and lost sight of what was right. Your grace and professionalism throughout this ordeal showed me what real character looks like. I have learned from your example. Please accept this small gesture as a token of my sincere regret, wishing you and your business all the best. Linda. I was touched by the gesture. It took courage to admit wrongdoing and seek reconciliation. I called Linda and thanked her, assuring her that I held no grudge. She cried on the phone, relieved to have closure. The winter season was phenomenal. I guided over 200 tours between December and March, introducing hundreds of people to the beauty of Vermont's backcountry. Many of my clients specifically mentioned that they had chosen my business because they had heard about my fight with the HOA and respected how I had handled it. One memorable tour involved a group from Connecticut that included a lawyer who specialized in HOA law. As we took a break at a scenic overlook, she asked me detailed questions about the case. Your experience is a perfect example of why I got into this field, she explained. HOAs can do wonderful things when they are properly managed, but they can also become little tyrannies when the wrong people get power. You were fortunate to have that state licensing agreement. Most homeowners are not so lucky. We talked for over an hour about HOA reform, property rights, and the balance between community standards and individual freedom. She gave me her card and suggested I consider speaking at national conferences about my experience. People need to hear stories like yours, she said. It could prevent others from going through what you went through. I considered her suggestion seriously. Maybe some good could come from my ordeal if it helped others understand their rights and stand up against unjust authority. In April, the Vermont legislature passed the HOA Reform Act, which included specific language preventing HOAs from interfering with state-licensed property uses. The law also required HOAs to notify residents of their rights and established a state ombudsman to handle complaints about HOA overreach. Governor Phil Scott signed the bill into law, and the State Parks Department sent me a congratulatory letter thanking me for my role in making it happen. Spring brought new opportunities. The Burlington Free Press did a follow-up story on my business, focusing on how I had bounced back from the legal battle and used the experience to improve my operation. The article included interviews with satisfied customers and highlighted the positive changes in the Ridgeline Estates, HOA. It was a redemptive narrative that felt good to be part of. I also received unexpected recognition from the Vermont Snowmobile Association, which gave me their Community Service Award for defending public trail access and promoting responsible snowmobiling. At the awards ceremony, I met other trail advocates who had faced similar battles with local governments and private interests. We shared stories and strategies, forming connections that would help protect recreational access across the state. As summer arrived and I transitioned to offering mountain biking and ATV tours, I found myself genuinely happy. The property my grandfather had left me was thriving. The business he had inspired me to start was successful. The community he had loved was stronger because of the changes that came from my legal battle. One evening in June, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when Gerald drove up. He had a bottle of bourbon and a serious expression. "Got a minute to talk?" he asked. "Always." "What is on your mind?" We poured drinks and sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Gerald spoke. "I wanted to update you on something. Linda and I have been working with a mediator to help the HOA heal from everything that happened last year. Part of that process involved tracking down everyone who was affected by Deborah's actions. We discovered something disturbing." My stomach tightened. "What did you find?" Deborah had been embezzling HOA funds for nearly 3 years. Small amounts, but it added up to almost $60,000. She was using HOA money to pay her personal credit cards and fund her lifestyle. The lawsuit against you was partly motivated by her need to create a distraction from her financial mismanagement. I was stunned. "Did you report this to the police?" "We did. There is an active investigation, and it looks like she will face additional charges. I wanted you to know because it explains a lot about why she was so aggressive with you. She needed a villain to rally the community around so people would not look too closely at the finances." I shook my head in disbelief. "That is insane. She destroyed her own life over money and pride." "Yeah, it is a cautionary tale. Power corrupts, and when you combine that with financial desperation and a lack of accountability, bad things happen." We sat quietly, processing the revelation. Eventually, Gerald changed the subject to lighter topics, and we spent the rest of the evening swapping stories and enjoying the peaceful Vermont night. In July, Deborah was arrested again, this time for embezzlement and fraud. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with no possibility of probation. The judge was particularly harsh because she had violated the terms of her earlier probation. I did not attend the sentencing, feeling no need to witness her continued downfall. The HOA recovered the embezzled funds through insurance and improved their financial oversight procedures dramatically. Gerald joked that the organization had transformed from a petty dictatorship into a model of transparency and community engagement. "We should send Deborah a thank you card," he said sarcastically. "Her terrible leadership taught us how to do things right." As autumn returned and I prepared for another winter season, I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. My business was stronger than ever. My relationship with the HOA had transformed from antagonistic to collaborative. I had played a role in reforming state law to protect property rights. And most importantly, I had learned that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult and expensive, is always worth it. The snowmobile trails opened in mid-November after the first good snowfall. On opening day, I led a commemorative ride with state officials, HOA board members, and local business owners. Patricia Hendricks from the Parks Department gave a short speech at the trailhead. 2 years ago, this trail was at the center of a contentious legal battle. Today, it stands as a symbol of how communities can come together to protect public access and outdoor recreation. Brandon Mitchell's courage in defending this trail has benefited not just his business, but thousands of Vermonters who depend on our trail system. Thank you, Brandon, for never giving up. The crowd applauded, and I felt a rush of emotion. It had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every legal bill, every moment of stress and uncertainty had been worth it to protect something bigger than myself. We rode together that morning, a diverse group united by our love of Vermont's outdoors. The trail was in perfect condition, the snow was fresh and deep, and the camaraderie was genuine. As we stopped at a scenic overlook, I looked back at the line of snowmobiles and riders stretching behind me and felt profound gratitude. This was what community should be. Not rules and regulations enforced by petty tyrants, but people working together to preserve and enjoy the things that make life meaningful. The trail was not just a path through the woods. It was a connection between people, between past and future, between the wild beauty of nature and our shared desire to experience it. As winter progressed, my business continued to thrive. I hired another full-time guide to keep up with demand. The state featured my property in multiple promotional campaigns. National snowmobiling magazines wrote articles about the trail and the legal battle that had saved it. I became something of a minor celebrity in the outdoor recreation community, known as the guy who stood up to his HOA and won. But fame was never the point. I just wanted to run my business, share my love of the outdoors with others, and honor the legacy my grandfather had left me. The fact that doing so had sparked broader change was humbling and unexpected. In February, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference on property rights and HOA reform in Denver. I accepted, curious to share my story with a broader audience. The conference was eye-opening. I met homeowners from across the country who had faced similar battles with HOAs over everything from satellite dishes to solar panels to home businesses. My story resonated with them because it showed that fighting back was possible and worthwhile. During a panel discussion, an attorney from Florida asked me what advice I would give to someone facing HOA overreach. I thought carefully before answering. First, know your rights. Understand your property deed, your local laws, and any state or federal protections that might apply. Second, document everything. Every email, every letter, every interaction. You will need that evidence if things escalate. Third, seek allies. Whether it is neighbors, local businesses, or state agencies, you cannot fight these battles alone. And finally, do not be afraid to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. These organizations count on people being too intimidated or exhausted to fight back. Prove them wrong. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people approached me with their own stories and thanked me for my courage. It was overwhelming and inspiring. When I returned to Vermont, I felt renewed purpose. I started working with state legislators on additional HOA reforms. I joined the board of the Vermont Property Rights Coalition, a nonprofit that advocates for homeowners facing legal disputes. I used my platform and experience to help others navigate the complex world of property law and community governance. Spring brought the annual HOA meeting, and the contrast with previous years was striking. The meeting was well attended, civil, and productive. The board presented detailed financial reports, proposed reasonable new initiatives, and actively solicited feedback from residents. Gerald had transformed the organization into something genuinely beneficial to the community. During the meeting, the board announced they were establishing the Brandon Mitchell Community Service Award, an annual recognition for HOA members who go above and beyond to serve the neighborhood. I was deeply honored and somewhat embarrassed. Gerald insisted it was fitting. "You showed us what good citizenship looks like, Brandon. You stood up for your rights while remaining respectful and working toward positive solutions. That is exactly the spirit we want to encourage in this community." As summer turned to fall and another winter approached, I felt settled in a way I had not in years. The anxiety and conflict that had dominated my life 2 years earlier had been replaced by stability and purpose. My business was successful, my relationships with neighbors were strong, and I was making a difference in people's lives through advocacy and education. The third winter season after the initial conflict was the best yet. I led over 300 tours, hosted a state snowmobile safety training program, and collaborated with the HOA on a community winter festival that brought together residents and visitors for a celebration of Vermont's outdoor culture. The event was a huge success, raising money for local charities and showcasing the positive relationship that had emerged from the ashes of conflict. One snowy evening in March, I was closing up my shop when a car pulled into the driveway. A middle-aged couple got out, bundled against the cold. The woman approached with a shy smile. "Are you Brandon Mitchell?" "I am. Can I help you? We drove here from New Hampshire specifically to meet you. We are fighting a similar battle with our HOA over a right-of-way issue, and your story has inspired us to keep fighting. We just wanted to thank you in person and ask your advice." We spent 2 hours talking in my shop, going over their situation and discussing legal strategies. I shared contact information for attorneys who specialized in property rights cases and connected them with advocacy groups that could help. When they left, they were teary-eyed with gratitude. "You have given us hope," the woman said. "We felt so alone and overwhelmed, but knowing that someone else fought this battle and one makes us believe we can too." After they drove away, I sat alone in the quiet shop and reflected on the journey. What had started as a simple dispute over a snowmobile trail had become a catalyst for change that extended far beyond my small corner of Vermont. The ripples from that initial conflict had touched countless lives, reformed state law, and inspired others to stand up for their rights. I thought about Deborah Patterson, now serving time in prison for her crimes. I felt no satisfaction in her imprisonment, only sadness for the waste of her potential. She could have been a positive force in the community, using her energy and passion to build rather than control. Instead, her need for power and her ethical lapses had destroyed everything. Her story was a warning about what happens when we give unchecked authority to anyone, no matter how well-intentioned they seem. HOA, like any organization, need accountability, transparency, and members willing to speak up when things go wrong. The price of freedom and fairness is eternal vigilance. As I locked up the shop and headed home, I looked up at the stars scattered across the clear Vermont sky. My grandfather used to say that the mountains teach us humility, and the wilderness teaches us resilience. Both lessons had served me well through the ordeal with the HOA. The property he left me was more than just land. It was a legacy of independence, self-reliance, and respect for the natural world. I had fought to protect that legacy, and in doing so, had honored his memory and preserved something valuable for future generations. The trail through my property would continue to welcome riders for decades to come. The state licensing agreement ensured that no HOA or local government could ever threaten it again. Kids who were not even born yet would one day ride those trails, experiencing the thrill of exploration and the beauty of Vermont's backcountry. That was worth fighting for. That was worth every moment of stress and conflict. That was the real victory, not the legal judgments or the reforms or the recognition, but the simple fact that a piece of wilderness remained accessible to all who sought it. I went to bed that night feeling at peace. The battle was over, the wounds had healed, and life had returned to the rhythm I loved. Tomorrow would bring new tours, new customers, new opportunities to share my passion for the outdoors. The mountains would still be there, constant and unchanging, reminding me what truly mattered. And somewhere out there, other people were facing their own battles with HOAs and other authorities. I hoped my story would give them courage. I hoped they would stand up, document everything, seek allies, and fight for what was right. Because that is how we protect freedom. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through ordinary people refusing to accept injustice, one case at a time. The snowmobile trail through my property was just a path through the woods, but it represented something profound. The right to use your own land as you see fit within the law. The right to operate a business without unjust interference. The right to access public lands and enjoy nature's beauty. These were not abstract principles. They were lived realities that required constant defense. I had done my part. I had stood up to bullying and overreach. I had protected not just my own rights, but the rights of everyone who valued outdoor recreation and property freedom. The trail remained open, the business thrived, and the community was stronger for having gone through the conflict and emerged on the other side. As spring arrived and the snow melted, revealing the brown earth and the first green shoots of new growth, I prepared for another season of change and opportunity. The cycle continued, as it always had, as it always would. And I was grateful to be part of it, living my grandfather's legacy, protecting the land he loved, and sharing it with others who appreciated what Vermont had to offer. The HOA that had once been my enemy was now my partner in promoting responsible outdoor recreation and building community. The state that had been my shield was now my collaborator in protecting public access. The business that had been threatened was now thriving beyond my wildest expectations. And I, who had once felt alone and overwhelmed, was now part of a network of advocates and allies fighting for property rights across the country. It was a good life, a life worth living, a life worth fighting for. And as I looked ahead to the future, I knew that whatever challenges came, I was ready to face them with the same determination and principle that had carried me through the battle with the HOA. The trail was open. The mountains were waiting. And tomorrow, another group of riders would experience the magic of Vermont's backcountry, thanks to one man's refusal to back down when faced with injustice. That was legacy enough for anyone.